took all of 1 week for the Arena Football League's third attempt at simply existing, simply being a viable professional sports league, to prove that it will not work. In the same week its rival, the Indoor Football League, had players go into the stands during a melee, the second time that has happened in the past year, by the way. Those running the AFL said, "Hold my beer," and then proceeded to produce a flop that garnered most, if not all, of the week's indoor football headlines. For many folks, myself included, their first exposure to the latest incarnation of the AFL was, well, nothing. Saturday night and Sunday games were supposed to be broadcast on NFL Network, but that did not happen. At the time of this video being recorded, no explanation has been given. The AFL basically doesn't respond to anyone. You'd barely know the league exists, and the NFL Network had no comment on the issue. However, I think we can read between the lines here. Clearly something has happened between the two sides that made the NFL Network unwilling to follow through on its pledge to broadcast games. This could potentially be something simple, like a technical issue, but the AFL games, were still streamed on something called Vire, as well as on its own streaming website, so it's not as if the games weren't shown at all. And given that neither side is commenting publicly on this issue or simply dismissing it as a small technical error that's being fixed, it leads you to believe that the differences aren't broadcasting issues at all. While that is certainly concerning, what happened to the Philadelphia Soul, one of the AFL's most recognizable teams, a cornerstone franchise, is a massive red flag warning any and everyone that a huge meltdown might be taking place behind the scenes. A report in the Philadelphia Inquirer noted that the team's head coach, Patrick Pimmel, stepped down the day before the team's first game. Then, most of the roster was released. By the way, no one seems to know who actually owns the Philadelphia Soul at this moment in time. It has also been reported that the team's original ownership group has since backed out of the deal. It is believed that the league is now running the franchise, but no one actually knows because those running the AFL have provided zero transparency on this situation, or any situations for that matter. Anyway, the Soul called up a bunch of guys from an American Arena League 2 side, the Dallas Falcons, to replace all the released players. That hodgepodge took the field during the team's blowout loss to the Louisiana Voodoo down in Lafayette, Louisiana, a game not attended by all that many people and which had some huge issues with the field itself. That wouldn't even be the worst of the Philadelphia Soul's adventures down in the bayou. No, it was also reported that the team was kicked out of its Super 8 motel during the road trip. You should really not be getting kicked out of a Super 8 motel. I don't want to be too derogatory towards the brand. I've stayed there. It is fine, I guess. But realistically speaking, you can smoke crack outside of a Super 8 motel and not get kicked out. In fact, basically the only thing you can't do at one of these properties is give them an IOU, or simply saying something along the lines of, "We're going to stay now and pay later." I know some fans really want to dismiss these events as simply a bump in the road, as growing pains for the league. History tells us that is nothing more than wishful thinking. These are indicators of an entity that is dying before our very eyes. What we are seeing now is the dying days of the AAF, or the original UFL, or any of those other sports leagues that have come and gone. Usually you at least get a few weeks before things just start crumbling all around you, or at the very least, the crumbling is not made public in those first few weeks of action. The AFL 3.0 couldn't even make it through the first round of games before the bad press started coming. Maybe it would be different if the AFL didn't have a pair of bankruptcies and foldings already under its belt. Maybe it would be different if the current league leadership had more of a plan and a vision for this incarnation of the AFL than simply saying, "We're here, money please." That's what really gets me about the opening weekend of the AFL 3.0. It should have been a huge occasion, yet you would have to be an absolute diehard Arena football fan to know that it was even happening at all. Really, apart from some local news pieces, it was invisible. A blip on the radar during a time when there is so much happening in the world of sports. Fans here are definitely a loser in this situation, but so too are the teams that have signed up for this go round of the AFL. A lot of these teams are making genuine attempts to make it work. They're invested. They want this to be a success. Unfortunately, they seem to be getting nothing in terms of support or guidance from the league office. Clearly, they have been promised a version of the AFL that harkens back to the league's heydays in the 2000s when it had that high TV visibility in the PS2 game. Instead, what it has gotten is nothing more than dysfunction and what is at most the third best indoor football league in America behind both the IFL and the NAL. That is what really gets me here. The AFL has so much brand value. It can tap into so much nostalgia from people like me still rocking defunct AFL team jerseys decades later. That was the entire allure of giving this thing a go round despite 2 previous failures. But there has been no vision behind this relaunch. All that's really been done is slapping a few familiar logos on stuff, dusting off a few old team names, and saying, "We are back." That is true to a certain extent. The AFL is back, but it's that barely visible, dying version that most people have moved on from years ago. There is perhaps not a better metaphor for the entire situation than what happens when you search for Arena Football League on Google. The first result is the AFL.com, a fairly nice looking website that hasn't been updated since February 3rd, 2023, when the league made its big relaunch announcement. At some point in time, though, those running the AFL decided that it wanted to have a different URL. So if you scroll down a little bit on that Google search results page for Arena Football League, you get arenafootballusa.com. This site lacks some very basic information. You know, things like a schedule, scores, standings, I don't know, minor details about your professional sports league. This new website also gets less traffic than the old website. Here's a graph of the traffic during the first 3 months of 2024. The old website is the orange line, new is the blue line. You can see here that most people are going to the old website that has zero information. Fuck me. This is both horrible and easily avoidable. We are talking about a simple URL redirect from the old website to the new one. It's like 4 minutes of work to do, and those running the AFL couldn't even be bothered to do it. More worrying is that how many of those visitors have gone to the old website, saw that it was dead, and just assumed the league was washed out, not happening? Given everything we know about web user habits, the answer to that question is a lot. There have been who knows how many people that went to that old website, saw nothing, and have never given the AFL a second thought because no one could be bothered to do something simple like a URL redirect. Also, what is up with that website name Arena Football US? Like, I don't even know. Let's move on. Given what we saw after 1 week of play, it's safe to say the AFL is doomed. But really, it was doomed way before that moment. I want to go all the way back to September 27th, 2022. That is the day those in charge of the AFL 3.0 held a soft launch to announce their league to potential sponsors, organizers, just a bunch of random industry people, I suppose. They held this event at the Circa Hotel in Las Vegas. Attendance was dismal. There's no other way to put it. So this soft launch event, it had 2 separate components to it. There was a get-together at Stadium Swim and a more formal thing in a meeting room during the evening. Maybe like 20 to 30 people not affiliated with the league actually showed up to this shindig. And that is a very, very generous estimate. Look at the photos from the event recap. The thing looks dead, and almost all of the photos are like the same 7 or 8 people. Let's call that event what it was: a practice in business masturbation, an organization pissing away money to celebrate itself despite the fact it had not accomplished a damn thing. No wonder the AFL 3.0 was already falling apart at the seams. It was doomed to fail before day one. It gets more deliciously ironic for the AFL though. Las Vegas actually has an arena football team, but they don't play in the AFL. The Vegas Nighthawks began play in 2022 and have opted to remain members of the Indoor Football League. The AFL soft launch was in Las Vegas, yet the arena football team that plays in that very city wants nothing to do with being in the AFL. You cannot write a better story than that. Speaking of the IFL, it is currently America's longest running arena football league. Everything the AFL did wrong in the past and is doing wrong now, the AFL does right. It's local, it's focused on visibility and making sure fans can watch games, and most importantly, it's not trying to be something it can never ever obtain. It has very realistic goals, and those fans, those people who support those teams, speak really highly of the IFL as an entity. It's far from perfect. The same thing goes for the NAL, another arena football league in America, but they found their niche. They found a way to have success playing arena football. The AFL, it doesn't seem like it's gonna make it. The playbook on how to run a successful arena football league in America exists, it's out there, and the AFL chose to ignore it. Just how long is the new AFL going to last? I mean, maybe it gets through the season if it's lucky, a few things break its way. It doesn't seem like all of the teams are going to be playing all of the games this season based on what we saw in week one. There's some dodgy attendance numbers. It just doesn't look like it's going to exist with this many teams. Ultimately, though, like the previous two versions of the AFL, this feels like it ends with a league in bankruptcy and folding. It's certainly a shame for those of us who have fond memories of the AFL, but you know what? Some things are just better left in the past, and this is probably one of them. Thank you for watching this video. If you would like to learn more about the history, the entire history of arena football in America, video upper right hand corner of your screen is the place to go. Until next time, I am Cheyenne Hollis. This is the Touchback, and as always, hashtag take it out to the 25.